Let's go, let's go, let's go. Aye, people wanna hate every day, it's okay.
Welcome back, Reckless Success. Tonight we have Gizelle Luccio on, and this is going to be a real treat. Gizelle, you come from
I'm here from Ashland, Oregon.
Ashland, Oregon. So we've already had Florida, now we have Oregon. People coming on from all over the country. Big things. I met Gizelle Saturday night, which was a few nights ago. We went to was it a retreat kind of?
Well, I would say it was more like an event.
An event that my wife Lisa, everybody loves Lisa, found on Facebook, and it was talking about just clearing your chakra, for just opening your mind for the spirit to come through to help us, because Lisa and I sometimes we struggle, or we working too much, or we're not spending enough time in the church, or we're not going to church enough. So we just don't really, we just struggle with it. So she seen this and she thought, well, that will be good for us. And it was a real treat. So I asked her to come on and she accepted. So tonight we're going to talk about a lot of really cool things you'll see. Gizelle, what really struck me about you is when we came in, I'm always skeptical, right? So she's telling me what we're going to do, and I'm like, all right, I just go along with Lisa because she knows everything, and she's my boss. So I'm the boss of the guys that work under me, but Lisa's my boss and everybody else. So when we got there, we talked for quite a while about your background, which we'll get into, and I thought all that was interesting. Just the fact, like, we'll get into it, but you talked about how you eventually became a Quaker, and I didn't even know what Quaker was. We left there and I looked up Quaker, and I'm like, man, that might be what we are, and I didn't even know it was a term or anything. So what struck me about you is about 2 years ago, I went to St. Louis to work, and while I was there, I had back trouble. Through this back trouble, I told Lisa to find me a chiropractor, and it was a myofascial chiropractor that I went to.
Okay.
And I had no clue what any of that was. I thought she was just going to fix my back. And when I got there, it was a totally different experience than what I thought. She asked me, she's like, do you know what I do? And I didn't know. And she told me, and she's like, well, I'm also not a healer. I don't want to call her a healer, but kind of like yeah, she does Reiki healing and works with people's energy. And again, I'd never even thought about energy,
Yeah.
And while I was in there with her, she asked me if it was okay to do this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, as long as it fixes my back. I'm good. And she started talking, and she was just had her hands on me, different than my normal chiropractor, And she told me to relax and go into a safe place. And I was all right, I'll ride along with you. And where we went was something that I'd never experienced before. And by that, I mean, she just told me to imagine I'm walking in a woods and I see a door and I'm by a river, and unlock the door. And I opened the door, and, I went through it. And in my mind, I had my eyes closed, which I don't know if there was even a light above me, but I was seeing orbs. She told me to, just if you see orbs, just let them do their thing. And with my eyes closed, I guess my imagination or however it was, I started seeing a slideshow. Imagine a book, and you're flipping through it and you're seeing like how they used to do the cartoons, and it would change through. It's just like that. And she started telling me about, well, my grandpa was always my best friend, and she kind of started leaning towards like he's proud of you and stuff like that. I'm like, wow, I don't even know this woman. I just came in here. How does she know anything about my grandpa? Or my grandpa could have been an asshole to me, and and how did she know that we were best friends like that? And so I left there, and there was a difference. I could feel it, and that's the first time I felt energy that I recognized it. I'm sure in the past I'd had this same energy, but I felt the energy in the room, like it was resonating, like vibrating almost.
Yeah.
It was so crazy to relate back to what you told me, that while she was had her hands on me and this slideshow was going through, I saw a clock, and the clock's hands were spinning real fast, and the clock took off spinning so fast that the clock shot off And I wasn't saying anything. When the clock shot off, she also shot off across the room. And she was like,
Wow.
whoa, what was that?
Whoa.
And she's like, and I said, whoa, that was a clock spinning. And right when it went off, you went off too. And she said, I seen the clock. Yeah, she was like, that's strange. I left there. I called Lisa. I'm like, oh, no, where you sent me, but make me another appointment. 'Cause that was crazy. So then we believe in God. We're just to lay that out there. We believe in God, all the teachings. I do have like little, things in my mind when I'm reading the Bible. I'm like, well, is this right or not? So I'm a little conflicted on some things, but I 100% believe in God. And while I was going to this lady, which is now one of our good friends, as you will be, she, as I was going there, she was telling me, she's like, your spirit guides are strong. She's like, I can feel them. She's like, I'm talking to them or seeing them. And I'm like, okay, I never even knew I had a spirit guide. My first part of my life up until almost 30, when I got out of prison, was just run wild and not even think about anything but Jesse. That's all I was worried about. And so she's telling me about my spirit guides, so much so that she had me, she's like, just close your eyes and talk to him. And I came up with a name of Running Horse for my spirit guide. And because I was even seeing my spirit guide, I was seeing it when my eyes were closed. I'm like, wow. And it was like an Indian on a horse.
Yeah.
And so it came up with Running Horse. So since then, I've always thought like, wow, I've got spirit guides. I didn't even know I had spirit guides. The day we came to see you, I was turning off of a back road onto a highway, and I had my wife, my oldest son, and my youngest son in the car. And I looked past my wife, and I seen some cars down the way coming, but I thought, oh, it's clear. I'm going to go ahead and go. And as I pulled out, it was crazy. I pulled out, and as I was pulling out, for whatever reason, I let off the gas a little bit. And right when I let off the gas, a car went right in front of our car and missed us by an inch. Like if I would have been another foot further, she was on her side, and it would have just ruined us.
Different story.
Yeah. So after that, I'm like, wow. And I was thinking, I didn't let off the gas, but we slowed down. I felt the car slow down a little bit. I guess I did let off the gas, but I don't know why. Usually I would take off and gun it to get in front of the cars coming.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow. And I'm thinking my spirit guide. I'm thinking God. So I think, this is all just my thinking. I don't know, but I think God and your spirit guides are separate. And I feel like that your spirit guides just help you. I feel in my heart that heaven, I've got a conflict with heaven and hell. I feel like we all go to heaven in my heart, and we come here for lessons. That's what I feel like. It's just, and so I'm like, wow, it's just so crazy. So then we come to your event that night. I'm like, oh, I know my spirit guides were with me whenever we about wrecked, and they slowed the car down. So we come, and you just talked about yourself and your past, and then you gave us all just a reading at the end. And right when you started, you kind of laughed and was like, your spirit guides really like you. Right then I knew. I was like, because it didn't match with anybody else's story. There was 12 of us, I think, at this event, and everybody's was a little different for them. So I'm like, I'm waiting for my turn thinking, okay, let's see where this goes. Because I hadn't said a word the whole night.
No,
but I did see you watch.
Talked.
I did see you watch me when I walked in, and I thought, she's seen something. She sees something there. And when you started, you just said your spirit guides really like you. And then you just laid into it, and it was all exactly of what I've got going on about working too much. And, they want me to kind of take a break for myself. How you would have known that is impossible. Even if you look me up online, you just know I'm a business owner. You don't know that I'm working too many hours, which I am. Right. And you told me that. So that really made me, I'm like, okay, she knows what she's talking about. So that was my experience on our introduction, kind of a background to where I got to that point. So now let's talk about you and what your background is.
Well, what's interesting about I did notice you. Well, I think what I noticed when you two walked in was certain people, well, all people carry energy. And I kept clocking, like I couldn't tell. I was hoping that you were going to stay for the event. I didn't know if you were like
Just there to make
just
a
there to
purchase
make a
at the
purchase and
place.
that you were going to be leaving. And I was really hoping that you weren't going to be leaving, and you ended up staying. And then, you know, the experience that unfolded, and us chatting afterwards. And I'm really grateful, by the way. I want to say thank you for being willing to have me come and share with you in this way. It's been something that I would say that in terms of my spirit guides, I've been getting this nudge for, dare I say, a number of years to like explore more podcasts or radio or whatever. And there's a part of me that goes into, well, I don't know that what I have to offer is that special, you know, and then I exit myself, you know.
Right.
But I know every time I do an event or I lead retreats, that people are profoundly, you know, changed and moved by what I do. And so I appreciate the opportunity. I'm very grateful for being a channel, you know, to have that clarity and be worked through. So you mentioned that I'm a Quaker. I grew up as a Catholic, you know, and when I was 14, prior to that, actually, I had a number of very profound spiritual, I'll call them spiritual experiences, openings. One of which happened when I was 18 months, and then I had another one when I was about 5, and then when I was 12. And I remember when I was 12, I had my first connection with a spirit not in this realm. And I'd gone to bed and I had my hand outstretched before I fell asleep, and I felt this other little girl holding my hand, and there was no one in my room. And it really kind of freaked me out, you know, truthfully.
Right.
And I pulled back from that, and because there's been this, I would say, like the veil's kind of thin, you know, between myself and that realm. And so there have been many, many opportunities where I have what I come to describe now kind of crossover experiences. So when I was, you talked about, you know, believing in God and going to church. I switched from being a Catholic to being a Baptist, dually aligned, for a number of years. And I went on a retreat when I was 14 to this retreat center in Virginia, because I'm from the East Coast.
Okay.
And when I went on this retreat, we arrived early, the group that I was with, and I lost track of my my boyfriend. And so I started wandering around all the different buildings. And I walked into this this one building. I just kind of intuitively, that I was drawn there. And so I walked up the stairs, and as I'm walking up the stairs, I'm hearing this angelic, like, singing. It's just, it was blowing my mind, and I went, wow, like, I didn't know that there was choirs or, so I opened the door, and when I opened the door to what you describe as like what I would imagine being heaven. And I'm blasted back by the energy, and I feel myself kind of slide down the wall. And I'm sitting on, it's not really the floor. I don't know what I was sitting on. But I end up I start singing. And it's not a voice that I was familiar with, you know.
Right.
But I'm joining that whole chorus, and it goes on for what I perceive to be hours. And I think in terms of time frame, it was. But that whole weekend, I had multiple openings of stepping into that alternate. And I knew absolutely that what gets described in, you know, the Bible or other holy books are not just stories. They are very deep, profound openings and experiences where we go back to kind of our truest selves, if you will, that union with spirit. And it turns out my boyfriend was actually in the room, and we didn't talk about it right away, but we are still friends. This happened over 50 years ago. And periodically we bring it up and I go, do you remember that? And he said, I know, it was the trippiest thing ever.
Right.
And, but the upliftment that came of there being no separation, and then bringing that back, and how do you integrate that energy and that absolute love and that absolute joy and the experience of life energy pouring through you? How do you bring that into day to day, and not create a split
Right.
inside of yourself? So when I was 23,
Hold that
yes,
before you get too far, because I was thinking of something while you were talking
okay,
that kind of related. I wanted to share. When I was in prison,
uh-huh,
so I had been just go, go, go. I was addicted to meth before I went to prison. Then I was clean for a few years. Kind of clean. I'd cleaned up a lot.
mm-hmm,
And then I go to prison, and I'd never opened the Bible. I'd never had I might have had a spiritual encounter, but I didn't relate it to what
right,
was going on. I've always had real high intuition.
mm,
When I went to prison, I'd never been caught with any drug, anything. I got a conspiracy charge, which means people told on me.
mm,
So the day I got indicted, I might have done one night in county jail for drinking underage. I'd never been in trouble for nothing. And here I'm going to federal prison with just hearsay. Basically, it was true, but it was hearsay.
right,
So I get to prison and I meet a guy that's who opened me up. It's the first time I calmed down because I didn't have a lot to do. I could just go walk around outside and, be in my own head and think about things. And I met a guy that was doing, he was 39 at the time and he'd been in prison since he was 21. And he still had like 10 or 15 years left to go.
wow,
And he was the most humble guy I had ever met. He never cussed. He
mm,
never said a bad word about anybody.
mm-hmm,
And he would pray a couple hours a day. He would go over to his bed and he'd pull a sheet over his head. And I'm thinking, what's this guy doing over there? And he'd tell me he's going to go pray. But he was so cool. I just wanted to hang out with him. And he was always so helpful. His name's Jeffrey Brown. I've lost track of him.
mm,
Jeff, if you're out there, look me up. I've tried to find him.
uh-huh,
But I was like, this guy's got something going on. He was just too happy and too nice.
mm,
And he was really, he would read his Bible and that's what he would do. And I would see things, I would get sick, like the flu. And
right,
I'm down 2 weeks. He would get the same symptoms as me. And he would start getting the symptoms, coughing. I'm like, oh yeah, it's
mm-hmm,
bad, dude. You're going to be down for 2 weeks. He would go pray for a couple hours. The next day, he'd have no
he'd
symptoms.
be healed, yeah,
I'm like, there's no way
mm-hmm,
that I'm sick for 2 weeks and you just had the cough that I did, same symptoms,
right,
and now you're healed. And that's the first time that I was like, okay, there's something going on here that
right,
I'm not aware of. And that's when I started, he's like, you want to do Bible study? I'm like, yeah, I want to do Bible study.
mm-hmm.
Whatever you're doing,
It's
teach me the
working for
way.
you.
And that's where I found God. That's where I accepted
Mm,
Christ. And it's really where my life changed. But I've always had intuition. And I feel like since then, since I accepted Christ, now I can recognize it more.
yeah,
So like before I wouldn't recognize it, I'd be running from the cops. Like, man, go left. And I didn't know what
mm-hmm,
was telling me to go left. Probably my spirit guides. I'm sure
mm-hmm,
they weren't too happy with me at the time, but they were there for me. I mean, there were so many chances I should have got killed in different things that I had done, and I didn't.
and you're
So
taken care of,
I was
yeah,
taken care of. So I highly believe in this energy. I believe in my spirit guides. I believe in God.
mm-hmm,
Um, but just that was my first experience of seeing somebody being able to heal themselves. So I think personally that there's people on earth that have these special gifts,
mm-hmm,
like, and they're all kind of different,
right,
some, the Reiki lady that I met, her gift was that
mm-hmm,
she couldn't, tell me what I was doing that night. It's not like she was a psychic and could see, what I was going to go back to the hotel and do, but she could
right.
just, while I was there. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to share
No,
that
no, I'm
about
glad you
Jeff.
shared it because it's, those turns, we have an opportunity, when we're presented with, does something speak to your heart or pull at your soul? And it's like if you say no to yourself too many times, the road gets narrower, not because you're being punished, but because you keep saying no, and you're limiting your options, and you're limited, and you're limited. What's beautiful about your story is that it's almost like your guides picked you up and went, okay, you missed all the road signs over here, and we're going to put you someplace where you can't escape,
Right.
call it prison,
Yep.
and plant a teacher right in front of you,
They did.
and you can still say no, but it'll be harder to say no.
Right. Oh, he
You know?
changed my life. There was no questioning it.
Yeah.
I couldn't question it like I said, when I never saw him sick one time in the 5 years I hung out with him in
Wow.
prison. And if he did get the symptoms that everybody else, like our whole dorm would start getting sick, not COVID, it was before COVID, but the flu,
Yeah.
everybody in the dorm would get sick. This guy, he's like, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
He's like, no, God's got me. I'm not worried about it. And he would be like, he would
Yeah.
talk clearly. He'd have a scratchy throat. It would be healed. So I feel like he was maybe a self healer, or maybe he wasn't, he was just working on his own self, but he was the most humble guy, nicest guy. People would mess with him. He'd come to me and be like, oh, that guy in there just tried to start something with me. And I'm like, Jeff, you want me to go take care of this? He's like, no.
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
it's good. He's like, I got this. He's like, but I'm not going to let it bother me, and I'm just like, man, you're in here for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
How are you so happy? Are you feel so blessed? He was so blessed. He was happy to be there. And that's what opened my eyes that there's more to life than just focusing on partying and drugs. I was like, okay, let's look at this Bible. And that's when, like, we do Bible study. And like I said, I'd never even read the Bible or anything. And he helped interpret it for me, because when you read it and you're not familiar with it, you're like, well, what are they talking about?
Right.
So he was definitely there for me, put there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very impactful.
Well, what happened for me after that weekend is I kept having these closer and closer, more kind of white light experiences. And you were talking about your intuition of just things that and that was kind of writ large in my life. I wasn't necessarily receiving visions at that time, but I'd have these very deep knowings. And so I didn't question. I wasn't ever really freaked out by it, but I did have this place of, how do I juggle what's logical in the world, what people say you need to do versus what these leadings are. And that's what I originally went about 12 years ago when I came out of the closet, so to speak, in terms of my doing my intuitive work, is I had a website that I called Soul Leadings, because I really believe that they're leadings, and that is, in Quaker, it's like, or calling, if you will, some people call it a calling. And so following a leading is kind of tricky because, people say all the time, well, God told me to do this, but there needs to be some sort of filter system, some way in which you kind of sort, what is my ego talking to me, or what is actually, that I can't say no to. So I eventually became a Quaker when I was 23, and they're very much, my experience in becoming a Quaker is that I had to step up in terms of my own connection with God, and I had to let go of outside forms or belief systems or institutions telling me what it was that I should or shouldn't be doing in order to stay right with God.
Right.
It shifted, and it was very scary because it shifted the responsibility from an outside, here's your checklist, this is what's going to keep you in God's good grace, to I am all of a sudden responsible for showing up in my relationship with God.
Right.
And the Quakers are the Religious Society of Friends. It's very interesting if you go back and you study history. During the Protestant Reformation, at the same time that there was the split between the Catholic Church and then all the different Protestant, ministers and preachers, there was this man named George Fox who came up, and he what he realized was that the Spirit of God was always talking. It didn't just end because the Bible got published.
Right.
You know, that divine inspiration is happening moment by moment by moment by moment. And so he didn't align with the Protestants. He didn't align with the Catholics, because his understanding about what was given to him is that we're all ministers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that to say that there is someone who knows better, who's the intermediary between you and God, puts not an interference, but like an extra step, or, you know, you're working with someone who is filtering that direct message, if you will.
Right.
And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but what I ended up discovering for myself was that I was much more comfortable with being told what was right and what was wrong. Even though I'd rebel against it, my understanding of how it is that I'm meant to be in connection with God profoundly had to change. And so in Quaker practice, when we sit and worship, what we are doing is we sit in an unprogrammed friends meeting. We sit and we wait, and you wait for God to speak through you as a minister. And so everybody is a minister. And so when I started doing what they call vocal ministry, there were times when my body would literally shake, and I would be given one phrase, and I would stand up or not if I couldn't stand, you know, and there would be this thing that would just pour out. And I remember, you know, I was a few years into it, and I went, I'm tired of being used in this way, you know,
Right.
like, and so I went to a meeting one day, and I went, okay, this is it. I'm not going to talk. I'm just not going to talk. You know, I'm just going to let other people, you know, minister today. I'm not going to talk. And so I felt the energy move up through my body, and I just put a lid on it. And I did not speak what it was that was given to me to speak. And I went home and I was sick the entire day. And I went, okay, never going to do that again. So what's happened over time is that what moved from vocal ministry has now moved into what I was able to share with you and Lisa and others. And that is that I'm given visions. I have this ability to be able to connect up or hook up with people's guides. And I have the same understanding that you do, that source is one, like huge, like that's God, right? But we're each given individual guides or supports. If you know, for some people, they talk about it in terms of their guardian angels.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for other people, like in Japanese culture, it's about their ancestors.
Right.
You know, that they pray to their ancestors. You know, for medicine men, it's their allies. You know, but we all have guides that support us in our spiritual journey.
That was always one of my hiccups. Like, how can Catholic and you got Pentecost or Baptist or Muslim,
Right.
they all believe in their own God, but we all got the same God. It's
Yeah.
just different cultures, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
So that was always my hang up. Like, well, you can't say that all the Catholics are going to heaven
Right.
and everybody else is going to
Right.
hell.
Right.
I just feel like in my own heart that we're up in heaven and a piece of us comes down here and our spirit guide is our soul up there, and that's just kind
Yeah.
of guiding us through a lesson that we're learning here on
Lovely.
earth.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I really do feel like the opportunity to be in human body is like being in a classroom. I mean, and I love this line that I've heard, and I can't take credit for it, that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that. So for me, you know, what eventually happened was the leading part. I felt led to do healing work. I was going to be a teacher, and I was in my last semester before finishing up my undergrad, and I knew that it was not my path. I knew it, and I went, "Oh my God, I have one more semester. What am I going to do?" And I was working with a spiritual counselor at the time, and I went in for a session, and he said, well, if you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would you want to do? And I said, I want to do what you want to do. But everybody wants to do what you do, you know? And at that time, I was in recovery. You were talked about, getting off of drugs and just being in the recovery process. And I come from a family steeped in alcoholism, and I joined a 12-step program to support me in that way. And then I got clean and sober because I didn't want to continue the family process. So for me, it's integral that healing integrates the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical aspects. All of it has to come together. So back then, because I'm a little bit older than you, they didn't have things like transpersonal psychology or the integrated studies that they have now in a variety of different graduate programs. So I ended up going to seminary. And for me, my journey was I did not want to, because of my Quaker background, in Quaker practice, the reason that Quakers are pacifists is not because they don't believe in killing per se. I mean, it's not like a judgment moral kind of thing. It's because they believe that there is that of God in every single person. And so if you kill somebody, you are killing that of God.
Right.
And the other thing about Quakers is that they don't take sides. That they're known for being about lifting up and supporting all nature of, like the abolitionist movement, huge. They ran the Underground Railroad. It's really about supporting every person, no matter what their race, color, creed,
Right.
their belief. Because how it is that you connect with God is personal to you, and we support that spiritual journey. So I wanted to be able to do counseling work where it was, if you will, kind of non-denominational,
Yeah.
that I did not feel led to be a minister. I didn't want to get ordained in a particular, denomination, but I knew absolutely if I was going to do emotional support and healing with people, it also needed to have a spiritual component. And so I traveled to the West Coast, and I ended up going to seminary. And eventually,
Clarify for me.
seminary?
I'm kind of ignorant to it. Yeah. What's
Seminary? Okay, so seminary is kind of like graduate school.
Okay.
And your focus in seminary, there's a number of different paths of study, but most people go to seminary. They either go to get a degree in religious education so that they become teachers.
Okay.
Or if you're, say, raised in a Baptist church, so the minister of education would be, they organize all the Sunday school and the classes and summer school camp and all of that.
Okay.
Or if you're a minister, then it's about preaching and being performing different ceremonies, the marriage and the funerals and all of that, and just, if you will, kind of being a leader that people go to in order to get guidance.
Okay.
So when I got there, they had mistakenly enrolled me in the wrong graduate program. They had me on the track to get a doctor in ministry, and it's called a Master's of Divinity. And I went, nope, this is not my path, So I ended up with a degree as a master's in theological studies, and I created my own program. And the focus was in pastoral counseling, but it also included church history, and it included study of theology, which is all the different opinions that people have about who God is and how God reveals God's self in all the various, Old Testament, New Testament, other holy writings. So fast forward, I think this is the part that I shared with you all, is I ended up working as a chaplain in treatment programs. And when you're working with people who are seeking recovery from drug and alcohol abuse or chemical dependency, initially, maybe not so much now because there's a real emphasis on the mental health aspect or what's called co-occurring disorder. But when I first started working in the field, there was a real integration between 12-step programs and the recovery process. So getting clean and sober, you might go to a 28-day or a 21-day or a 30-day program, and then you transition into some sort of 12-step support group to continue that journey. So as a chaplain, I wanted to be able to help people find a path for themselves individually. And so their journey was not religious in nature. So I developed a number of lectures about the nature of spirituality and recovery. And I loved the work. Like I just lit up inside of myself. And the opportunity the privilege really to sit down with people and have them share their journey and their experience with God, their religious journey, and maybe their wounding as well, and their disbelief and their atheism, and like not re-educating, but kind of expanding their understanding about how spirit is way, way, way bigger than any form that we restrict God to. And I almost don't like using that word anymore because there's so many associations. So in this journey of being of service in that way, I'm also growing in my own gifts, And a number of years back, I ended up having an accident where I blew my knee out, actually. I severed my ACL, and I was unable to work. I was unable to drive. And it's like God, when I talked about you being plucked up and put in the prison, for me, it was like I got pulled out of working in any agency and being able to drive and support myself. And it was like, I can remember arguing with the surgeon going, no, I got to have surgery now. Like, I can't not work. I mean, I'm it. And he just looked at me, and I was in total shock at what had happened. And so for 2 years, I ended up shifting and working with people in my home. And in less than a month, my gift had changed from that kind of vocal ministry of what pours through, and I would get downloads of images. And so I'd close my eyes. And when you were talking about, I loved it when you were describing your vision that you had when you went on that journey inwardly, and it was like that flip card.
Right.
So that's what happens for me is when I'm doing what's can be called like a past life reading, like what are the influences of and really past life is kind of a misnomer, because I believe that our soul is all the things are happening all simultaneously, and quantum physics certainly supports that, that there is not time stretched out linearly in the way that we understand it, but that all of that, our being, our soul, our journey, everything is impacting and touching on everything at the same time.
Right.
So it would be like a Rolodex is the way I would describe it. It's the same kind of thing. And it would stop on a certain scene, and then I would describe the scene. And then what I'm given is interpretations. Like there's information that just kind of pours through me that I don't know, I'm just being a channel at that point. And I remember going, oh my God, like this is happening. And so I called someone up that a friend of mine had introduced me to, and I said, I don't know exactly what's happening to me. And so she said, do you want me to come over? And I said, yeah, if you would. And she had a similar kind of gift, but different. It wasn't visions in the same way that I received, but she sat down and she said, why don't you just start? And so I said a prayer, and I closed my eyes, and I just started, like there was this whole thing that unfolded. That's the other thing is I'm conscious while it's happening, but I don't remember, like I save recordings because it's important. I know it's important that people may want to listen to the reading over and over again, because there's teachings that are like multi-layered and very rich. And so I did this whole reading for her, and I opened my eyes, and she said, okay, so everything except there was this place right here where you stopped and you did not share and you went over here. And I thought, how did she know that? You
Right.
know, like,
Right.
how did
Skip
she
that
know
part.
that? So I closed my eyes back up and I dropped back into that same place, and spirit like revealed that piece. And she opened it up. I opened my eyes up and she said, okay, she said, there's nothing I can teach you. You are reading from the highest of the Akashic records, and you're ready to share this. And so that began my journey, and it was a real shift from the vocal ministry to, working with people, and it integrated because I had the training, the clinical training, that there are times when I do readings for people where they're not ready for what it is. Like
Right.
it's kind of like, oh, well, this is kind of fun, let's go play a video game, and they don't really know
Yeah.
what it is they're saying, yes to, and they sit down and they think, oh, this will be like a little oracle reading and I'll get some information. And then I drop in, and then, and I learned the hard way with one woman. She just, I didn't know because I have my eyes closed. I open my eyes and she is like weeping. And then she runs off. She leaves for about 10 minutes and then she comes back in and she said, I'm really sorry. I just didn't expect. I didn't know what to expect. And after that, I realized that I need people to give me permission, because at some level they need to be cognizant that they're opening up to receive information, and it just solidifies and it helps prep people for what can come through. So the counseling training that I have is wonderful because it's like, okay, what do I do with this information? And so that's part of what I offer. I don't just do readings and then leave people hanging.
Right.
I say you can do follow up. I do mentoring for people, people who want to know how to deepen their own spiritual connection.
Do you have to be face to face with them, or could this be over the
No.
phone?
In fact, I've done services with people in Finland, and Zoom has been a very interesting, because I used to just do it on the phone and then I'd be this kind of disembodied voice, or sometimes Skype. But Zoom provides a really interesting opportunity because some people feel like they have to see me, they have to have that connection, and I think what they don't really understand is that the connection really isn't with me per se, it's with their own guides. And so,
When I first saw you, I
uh-huh.
thought, I know this lady. Like when we
Mm.
walked in, I even told Lisa, I said, I thought you were from here. I was like, I know that lady.
Ah,
And she's like, ah. I was like, no, I've seen her before, but
uh-huh.
it's just, you looked very familiar whenever I saw you. And it might have been my guides, I don't know, but something was telling me
Yeah.
that you were safe and it
Yeah.
was all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a knowingness. I think we all kind of travel together in tribes,
Right.
and I think there is a knowingness when souls come in to do a piece of work, that we find each other,
Yeah.
you know, and
That's
and we
funny.
do that work
Lisa and
together.
I are always talking like we feel like we've got people in our soul family.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like people that we connect with, and Lisa and I are highly connected on some level besides marriage.
Right.
Like I feel like we've been together before this life. It's
Right.
like she is my soul family without a doubt. And we have other people that come into our lives when we're like, this is not a chance. And I'd like to share that story that we had happen
Oh
recently.
yeah. Yeah.
So, previous episode, I talked about working with this company, and so this is like 8 years ago, and now we're trying to get this next level for our business, and we're looking at this job. This is just at the 4th of July this year.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at this project for our company, and I'm telling Lisa, I'm like, there's only one company in all the Midwest that does this type of work that could help us with this project. And I'm like, but I did kind of work with him one time, a little bit. And that was the last I talked to him was like 8 years ago. But I'm like, Lisa, you call, 'cause she's the boss. I'm like, you call and talk to him and let him know we're looking at this job and we'd like to, you know, look at it with them, kind of partner on it.
Right.
So she made that call on Wednesday, and she got the voicemail. She called the company and they sent her over to, she just thought another worker there, an estimator or something. And she got this guy's voicemail and she left him a message. So then 3 days later, we're here in our local area, which is 2 hours from where this guy's from. And we're staying at the Lake of Egypt, 4th of July, and we go out on the boat and we see a boat beside us. And I've got my music blaring on our boat, and the guy on the boat beside us is like dancing a little bit. And I thought he said something to me. So I turned the radio down and I was like, what? And he's like, we're going to tie up by you with that music. And I was like, come on. And the boat that they were on it was a pontoon boat, but like I was riding behind it. I could smell gas. I'm thinking, they got to get that motor worked on. And I wasn't being judgmental, but I don't know. I was thinking they need to get their boat worked on. I'm like, yeah, well, I was just joking. And they were like 50 feet away from me. We're yelling across the water. I was like, well, come on. And we leave. We get out of the no wake zone, and I'm on a ski boat, and I take off. They're on a pontoon boat. I go 2 miles away out to the main channel, and I'm out there, and there's like 3,000 boats on the lake. And 30 minutes later, we see their boat come tooling by, you know. And my son is like, Dad, there's that boat you said we tie up to. I'm like, we're stopped. We're already sitting here, you know. And he mentioned it again. I'm like, all right. You know, I'm all about meeting new people. I'm not shy. I love meeting people. I love helping people. I love hearing people's stories, just making them feel like, you know, that they're important, basically. So I'm like, okay, let's go. So we go over and I pull up and I'm like, you guys care if we tie off to you? And they were a cool family, you know. They're like, yeah, come on. So we tie off. And while we're talking, we talked for like 20 or 30 minutes, just another family and our family, you know, they had some kids our age, and we're chit-chatting. And I mentioned about Lisa going to Vegas. And one time they took a private plane, and the guy's like, oh yeah, we got a private jet. Me being judgmental about their gas motor, their motor that needs work on. I'm like, okay, if you got a private jet, you'd have a nicer boat, but whatever. Tell me your story, bud. But he's like, yeah, we got a private jet. And he's like, well, it's not mine. He's like, it's our company's, but, you know, take it whenever we need to. I'm like, huh. And I'm still not believing him. I don't know where he's going with it. I'm like, eh. And then I was like, you got a private jet. What are you guys doing? He's like, oh, we do a lot of river work. And that's when it started clicking in my mind. And Lisa said, you do river work? She's like, we're looking for somebody to do this project with that works on the river. And that's when his eyes lit up. I'd seen it kind of register with him, and he was like, how did it go, Lisa?
He said, what's your name? Did you call me 2 days ago and leave
Yeah.
me a voicemail?
We're tied off to this boat. Yeah, we're tied off to this boat, and Lisa's like, we're looking for somebody to do river work. She said, we're federally woman-owned. And I seen his eyes light up, and he goes, did you leave me a voicemail 3 days ago? And she was like, who are you? And he goes, I'm so-and-so with this big company. And I'm like, there is no way that, I mean, this is like a $100 million a year company, easy. They do a lot of work. I'm like, there is no way. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm one of the 3 owners. And just the fact, like the law of attraction, how that worked.
Yeah.
That
And 3,000 boats.
3,000 boats. He's from 2 hours away. They had that was their first, I think they said that was their first time that this year coming down, because they had bought a house down here and remodeled it.
Yeah.
He's like, this is our first time even coming down here. But he pulled out his phone. He's like, did you leave me a voicemail? He's like, me and my wife just listened to this voicemail 2 days ago on the drive down here. And I was telling my wife, like, who's this person leaving me a voicemail about this job? I've never heard of them. And I just feel like it's the law of attraction. And that happens to us a lot. We talked about another guy recently that works for another company. And we're just like, we keep hearing good things about this guy. We're like, man, everybody I talk to, he's like, man, if I had a guy like that, I'd be set, because that guy is really helping this company out. And this past weekend, I'm sitting at a blackjack table, and the guy across from me, like, something kept me looking at him. He was with like 4 friends, and I kept like thinking like something's familiar about this guy. And Lisa comes over and she whispers in my ear, and she's like, "That's that guy that we were just talking about." And I look across and I was like, "Are you so and so?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I'm Jesse May." And he's like, "Oh, it's good to," he'd heard about me too. He's like, "It's good to put a face to the
Wow.
name, you know?" And I was
Wow.
like, that's just crazy that we talk about things and
Yeah.
then we run into these people
And
or
then
do
those
things.
connections start happening. I know.
And I've always preached it on the podcast, contacts, connections. I learned this when I was right before I dropped out of high school in freshman year. I went from high school, they sent me to the college, the community college, to do like a credit catch up.
Yeah.
And while I was there, and I'm 40 now, so when I was in high school or a freshman, cell phones weren't a thing.
Right.
They started coming out right, about the time I was 18, or I didn't have one at 16.
Right.
They just came out, and this guy was telling us he had his notebook he pulled out, and it was all these contacts he had met through life. And he's like,
Wow.
one thing that's really important is contacts. He's like, if you meet somebody and you hit it off or whatever, you talk to them, he's like, get their number, because you never know where your paths might cross, or if they might have something to offer, you might have something to offer them. He's, even if you're not friends, but just get their contacts. So I've always done that. And even on the way home tonight, I was kind of running late to get here. I knew you were here, and I was coming down 13, and I saw a guy walking on the new sidewalk. And I'm coming out of Carbondale, and he's way back, so I had to turn, go back up the frontage road. But he was walking with his lunchbox. I could tell he just got off work. He had a green shirt on with a company logo that I know around here. And I thought, man, that guy's, I could see him on the phone walking with his lunchbox. And I was like, he's in the stretch of there's no houses around here.
Right.
So
And no cars coming.
no cars. So I turned around, I went back, I pulled up. I'm like, hey man, you're walking, but you don't look like you should be walking. You got a long way to go. I was like, hop in, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to Carterville. That's where I'm going. I was like, get in, I'll give you a ride. And he hopped in, and we're riding, and I was like, hey man, my name's Jesse May. And he's like, I know who you are. I had no clue who this guy was. I didn't stop because I knew him or nothing.
Wow.
And he's like, I know who you are. And I was like, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm Joe. And I'd never hung out with the guy, but he was married to a person I went to grade school with. But like,
Oh my
how he knew
gosh.
me, but I
Wow.
wasn't stopping to pick him up for anything. I just seen somebody that looked
Yeah.
like they're out of place that was walking. I'm like, man,
Yeah.
it's going to take me 10 seconds to turn around and help this person out. So I
Right.
feel like when God works through us, and this is like all over the country, war always messes me up, because like we're going to war for two higher power people, in the politics
Right.
that are sending a bunch of people that don't even know these people.
That's right.
We're going over to another country and killing people we don't even know,
For
just
what?
because these people are telling us to. Like
Exactly.
that always messes me up. So I always try to share love, share kindness. The guy's down on his luck. Try not to judge,
Yeah.
because I've been there. I've
Right.
been through it all. So I can relate a lot of the times. I've been completely broke, walking down the side of the street with a lunchbox in my hand and cars passing by. And I'm thinking, man, if somebody just give me a ride.
Right.
So I try to live my life doing that.
Yeah.
And it's good to hear your story about, because I didn't grow up going to church, to hear that you did grow up, studying the Bible, going to church, seminary,
Right.
and that you still feel the same way I feel. Because I'm always questioning, like, am I wrong for not doing it this way or that way? But I just feel like we're all here, we all sin, or none of us are living a sinful or sinless life.
Right.
So you can't judge one person's sins by another. That's just the way I always think of things. I see a homeless person, I feel bad for him. Lisa definitely feels bad for him. Just try to help people out. And sometimes they don't want help, but it's just, you never know what they're going through. Another quick story. I've got a buddy that has a son, and I gave him a moped I told him, come work it off here at my house,
Yeah.
And I was pushing him. He'd come over, he'd mow, and I'd get home, and it wasn't like great, and I'm like telling him, he's in high school. I'm like, dude, you got to do this or that. Or I had him pull the weeds, and it took him what I thought was a long time. I'm pushing him. I wasn't doing it to be mean. I was pushing him because that's like my role as a boss. I was trying to make him be the best version of himself.
Right.
So he still owed me a couple $100. And yesterday, and then he was going to come help us clean up after an event we had. And then he ghosted us. And I've always looked up to this kid. He's like really big in football here, really good in all the sports. So I messaged him and I'm like, man, I'm just disappointed. You know, you haven't, it's been 6 months. You haven't given me even a partial payment, $10, whatever. You ghosted us. What's going on? And his response was right away, just come get it. I'm done with you, or just real hateful.
Wow.
And my response was, I'll be right there. So I told Lisa, I was like, look at this. All of a sudden, this guy that I've always thought was great is sending me this hateful message. And I went out I got in my truck. I'm going over there, go repo my moped. And I thought about it and I thought, let me call him. Let me see what's really going on here.
Yeah.
There's something at
gotta
the heart
be a
of this.
backstory
Yeah,
there.
there's a
Yeah.
backstory. So before I pulled out of the driveway, I called him and I was like, hey man, what's going on? Why are you talking to me like that? What am I missing here? And he's like, I said, I've always cared about you and thought you're a great person. So where's this attitude all of a sudden coming from? And he's like, no, you didn't. And I'm like, what? Or no, you don't. You don't like me and all this stuff. And I'm like, where are you getting that? Well, when I worked for you, you were giving me a hard time. And I was like, listen, buddy, I was doing that to help you. I was like, just like you're great in football and your coach is on your butt the whole time, I was just doing that for work. And then he kind of, opened up about a bunch of other stuff going on in his life, his grades or his, he can't focus and this and that. And I'm like, and I'm glad I called him because I was about to react in a way that ain't me, just by, okay, I'm gonna go get this moped. And he did work for it. So I didn't want to go take the value that he had in it away from him, because he just owed me a little bit on it.
Right.
The money wasn't an issue for me, but I called him. By the end of the conversation, I'm like, listen, I do care about you. I do love you. You're a great kid. So, and he reciprocated, he's like, I love you too, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But sometimes people are just going through things that we don't realize. And before we react to that, we need to think about it. Let's calm down. Let's figure out what the issue is here. So
And then,
that's how I'm trying to live my life. And I told him at the end, I said, listen, if you need help with school, I will gladly help you with a tutor. Find somebody to help you tutor if you need help with it. Whatever you need, I'm here for you, man. And I was like, and I kind of gave him the same speech. I'm like, in life, you don't want to burn bridges with people over silly, you had something totally else going on and I just called you at the wrong time, or I messaged him at the wrong time, and it ignited him
landed wrong. Yeah.
to respond hateful. So I don't go to church every Sunday, but I sure try to do my best to live a life that is helping people instead of hurting people, being more impactful for people than being negative. My first 30 years weren't like that. First 30 years. And it's crazy now that I look back, but I was addicted to meth. And I do believe that drug it chemically and messes with your head to where I don't believe in hell, but I do believe the devil is there and trying to, and that, like when I was on meth, I bragged about like, oh, me and the devil are doing this. Like I would never say stuff like that now, but like it was just my chemicals were messed up. I was all, I didn't feel love at the time. I didn't feel like anybody cared about me. So, and I gave him the high school kid, I gave him that speech too. I said, buddy, listen, I dropped out when I was a freshman. I was like, you got great opportunities, and because he's like, I'm afraid I'm not going to be as good as last year. I'm like, you're a beast, dude. This is your final high school year. You're going to kill it. You just got to focus, put your mind to it, and you'll do it. So I'm glad that I was able to connect with him again on that level and be a mentor instead of an asshole, that's just being hard on him. So
it's funny. People ask me, I had some friends a number of years ago when I came out of the closet, so to speak, and started doing intuitive work. I used to be really worried about the perception because of my training as a counselor and my master's degree of people prejudging, like, what is this wackadoo kind of, work that you do? And what I've discovered, maybe it's just because I'm getting older, you know, but after a while, I just go, what's most important is using all the tools of whatever our individual gifts are,
Right.
And I remember in your pieces of what came through for you, and for one of the reasons when they were talking about the image of the turtle for you, and like the care and the impeccability that you use when you put one step, and like each step that you take, it's there. Everybody has a gift or a way of healing, and it may not be that you're a doctor or you're a nurse or you're a Reiki master or whatever it is, but we all have the opportunity to be able to heal each other. And so when you were talking about your friend, in prison, who could open himself up and align himself in such a way in his connection. And some of the misconceptions that people have is, well, if these bad things are happening to me or these illnesses, then I must not be in alignment with God. And breaking down those misconceptions about, what's the word? Kind of that punishing nature about, if you've got to do it this way in order to be in God's good grace, or, if you're successful, then that is proof that, God is smiling on you.
Right.
And if we go back full circle to where we started the conversation about this being a classroom, sometimes what keeps us close to God is not the success, because some people can't handle it. It's like they get too far out there and too far down the road, and maybe it's not about being successful externally. It's about, what are the spiritual lessons? What are the gifts that are underdeveloped that are needing to be opened up? And my work mostly focuses on that. I know other people have other gifts, I have a very dear friend who she does clearings. She clears land, she clears entities. She's, that's just that's her work, that's her gift. And I connect people up with her, when I get that this is, if you want to call it like a barrier, something that's gotten like a little cloud over it, but it's not my gift. It's not how God is using me, but it is how Spirit is using her, or the energy, life force energy. And I think we all have our own gifts.
I feel like if people opened up to energy and stuff,
Yeah.
we were having trouble here with our fish farm. So we reached out to a person that does land clearing.
Yeah.
Looking at it, and this person, I don't even think they were in Illinois, and all we done was send them an overhead picture of our house.
Right.
And I personally know that our land used to be a coal mine across the street, and there was like 400 houses out here.
Wow.
There was a post office in 1900, in the 1800s, early 1900s. Post office that closed in 1960 here. 2 stores, 2 schools. This was a whole big town right here. When we were digging the ponds, I was finding hand-dug wells, like brick line wells, every 50 feet.
Wow.
And I'm kind of freaking out, I'm like, what is this? I'm telling Lisa, I was like, there's a lot of houses here. There's wells constantly. And I was finding like little porcelain hands. My brother found 2 little porcelain hands.
From like dolls?
Yeah.
Wow.
From back in the 1900s.
Wow.
Bottles and stuff. And so we had this guy from out of state look at our land from overhead. Oh, yeah. And the gnats. We had these gnats that you would come down our road and there wouldn't be no gnats. And then right when you hit our property, this whole property was just gnats. Like you go outside, there was so many gnats. You're like, what in the world?
Wow.
You would get past our property, no gnats.
No gnats.
I'm like, there's something going on here. So we called this guy and he looked at it and he was like telling us, he's like, oh man, there was a lot of stuff happening right there. And he mentioned a collapse. He's like, there was a collapse there that killed a bunch of people and their like spirits are stuck around there.
Right.
And this is all new to me. I'm like, Lisa's telling me this. I'm like, How
Yeah,
much did
yeah.
that cost? Right. And,
Right, not much.
yeah, it wasn't. And so anyways, they cleared it. There hasn't been a gnat here since, I don't
Yeah.
think. It was
Yeah.
like 3 years of hell with these gnats.
Right.
Like you couldn't have a event here or a party or anything because there was I forgot
Wow.
all about the gnats. But like I almost
Oh,
wanted to move. I'm like, what is going on with these
yeah.
gnats? But after that, that's
You
been
must have
cleared.
bought the property for a really cheap price because of all the gnats.
No, the gnats came after.
Oh my
We
God.
disturbed the ground. Stirred up
Oh,
problems for us, and we dug a well, and they said the water affected these spirits that
oh,
were stuck, and I think that brought us the problems.
Yeah.
right,
We messed
right.
up the ground and brought on our own problems.
We actually dug a well. So this was a mine,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking about a collapse. Well, when I looked at my field, I didn't see nothing but dirt and grass.
Oh,
When I dug the ponds and I saw the hand dug wells
yeah.
in the dam, we hit a mine shaft that was like 12 foot
Oh,
by
wow.
12 foot concrete that just went straight down in the ground. And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be able to dig a pond here because there's this
Right.
mine shaft.
Right.
And we built the dam over the mine shaft. I'm like, let's just try it. And we had a well installed to fill the ponds. And they went
Ah,
down 180 feet and they hit a mine shaft. So the water that we were filling the ponds with was
was
out of the
into,
mine
whoa,
shaft.
wow.
And the guy that cleared it was talking about a collapse. And I'm like, there ain't no collapse. I didn't even know there was a
There
mine. I
was a
was just
mine
piecing
underneath.
all this together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's a mine shaft. These
Mm-hmm.
were houses. So then I got on Google and started looking, and I'm like, this was a whole town at one time of people living here.
Wow.
So
That just got covered up.
they just got
Amazing.
covered up. Well, when the
Wow.
mine went out of business in 1912, they took all the houses because they were like cookie cutter houses. They
Mm-hmm.
built them and they moved them a couple miles down the road to another mine. So basically, instead of like demoing the houses, they basically took them all up and moved them a couple miles down and left all their wells, and it just dried up and
And filled in.
filled in.
Wow.
We'll come home. Lisa's came home 2 times, I think. And first time there's a car parked out here behind her house, and she goes out and there's a guy with a metal detector, and he's just walking around with a metal detector, and she's like, what are you
What are
doing?
you doing? Yeah.
And he's like, just looking for coins. And she's like, well, you can't be here. We were actually digging the ponds at the time, so they seen the dirt getting disturbed, and they come out with the metal detectors.
Oh,
Possibly, I'm thinking the previous owners let them do it. So she's like, you can't be here, you gotta go. Like a month later, she comes out. Was it the same guy? Or was it, yeah, the same guy. He's back. She's like, you gotta go. And he's like, well,
opportunistic.
yeah, he's like, well, if I find a coin, I'll split it with you. He's like, the coins are worth like $5,000 if we find these coins. And we found one. So I stripped all the topsoil when I built the
Mm-hmm.
pond, top few feet of dirt, and I piled it up to sell for, because we do construction.
Yeah.
And they were wanting to get that topsoil and check it
Oh,
out.
yeah.
And one day I was walking by, me and my brother, and he found a penny, but it was just like a piece of copper. You couldn't see the head or anything on it. But our neighbor, he has found whole coins with the writing still on. So the
Wow.
mine would pay their people in their own money. So the stores were their stores, the mine stores.
Yeah.
They would pay them in like mine money, and then they would go to the store to redeem.
Right.
So he has our neighbor
So they
across
had
the
their own currency per
so,
se.
yep. So our neighbor's got some of like pristine condition of these coins he's found. I have never.
Wow.
I've spread this topsoil all over Southern Illinois. Who knows how many coins I've put in people's yards? So,
Giving the riches away, are you?
I've been giving them away, but I should have probably hit it up. I still got some. I should have probably checked it for stuff. But all the time, like in my topsoil, it's great dirt, but I'll see porcelain or old glass, and it's all from 1800s into the 19. This job we're doing that's behind you on the wall, we just are wrapping this project up. That big thing is called a tar pit. So we do environmental work, and they used to manufacture. It's a manufactured gas plant,
Uh-huh.
and in the late 1800s into the 1900s, they would degasify coal to make natural gas for the cities and the
Oh,
towns.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
a byproduct was this tar. So they had these big wells, and they'd dig them, and whenever 1920, they didn't really care. So when they decommissioned it, they just caved in all the brick on itself and then covered it all up with dirt and left all the
Wow.
tar in the ground.
Wow.
So when I got to the bottom of that, I was digging brick from where they caved the walls in. And I got to the bottom and I found this one big block, and that project's in Murfreesboro. At the very bottom of it, I found this block like this, and I grab it with the traco, and when I pick it up, it's like lifting up the traco, and usually I can pick up
Whoa.
huge blocks. I'm like, what is that?
Metal?
Yeah, and I curl it up, and it's a safe from
It's
like
a safe.
1900.
Oh my God.
I told my brother the door was open on it. I
Oh,
was thinking
darn.
when I picked it up, I was like, yes, I'm gonna be rich. And
Oh,
I curled it up, and I could see the bottom. It had like a twist in thing on the bottom. I don't know, maybe a bank deposit dropped in it, and it was full of mud. But I told my brother and Lisa, I'm like, whoever put that safe in there, that was when because it was at the bottom,
Right.
below the brick. So while that tar wheel was still in commission, somebody had stole a really heavy safe, got the goods out of it, private bank, and threw it in that tar wheel.
Right.
So
Covering their tracks, so to
covering
speak.
their tracks. I'm always
Wow.
finding trippy stuff. But
Gosh.
it makes me feel good, because one thing that makes me feel good about doing the environmental work and the work that we've been doing is my first 30 years when I was doing meth, I was doing a lot of damage to the earth. So like I would leave trash, chemicals, stuff that shouldn't be just thrown on the ground, and I would
Right.
I didn't even think about it.
Poisoning it.
So now I feel like I'm kind of redeeming myself by getting all this bad stuff out of the
Right.
ground and putting it where it needs to go.
Right.
So
Yeah. And we never know really how it's like the pebble in the pond, right? The ripple effect of what it is that we do. We just do what's given us to do right in front of us, and it doesn't serve us to compare our work to someone else's work and what's more valuable, because we're all part of the same web of life, you know?
I, I tell myself all the time, I'm like, I'll see somebody that's, for example, the other day I was at a store and I saw a woman, and she was probably like 18 or 19, but she was really small. She wasn't like what they would call, or
Person?
she wasn't a little person, but she was just really small. And in my mind, I was thinking, and then like she's 18, and then like a 10-year-old girl walked by, and she was bigger than this girl. But I'm like, man, that girl's just her bones and everything, her face. And I remember thinking to myself, but she's probably got a big soul inside that little body. You know, just don't compare just because she's a little person. Because I was almost thinking like it's almost like she's not a person, she's so small. But I was thinking, but I bet she's got a big soul
heart.
inside
That's
there and a
right.
big heart. So.
Yeah.
And she's living her life and doing her thing, and she's got her struggles. So
Yeah.
don't judge anybody just by looks or appearance or anything, because everybody's doing their own path. Everybody, I think about it when I see like a family member I haven't seen in 5 years or something. I'm like, every day they're living life and doing their thing. And I see them, I'm like, hey, same old, you look the same, but like every day
Externally.
they're doing their thing.
And there could be a whole world of difference transformed inside, you know?
Right.
It's really
It's an
interesting.
interesting life we live
It
here
is.
on Earth.
It is.
Well,
Well,
this
thank
has
you.
been a good podcast.
Thank
Would you
you.
like to share? Because people, I'm telling you, if she can do it over the phone or Zoom, I would highly recommend getting a reading, because it was very impactful for Lisa and I. Everything she said was personalized just for our life. There's no way that it could have been any different. Like, she named everything that was going on. You talked about how hard we work, how we need to slow down, take breaks. And I mean, we talk about it all the time. We're like, what is our goal here? What are we doing?
Yeah.
So if you want to get a reading, contact
Gizelle Luccio. And I have actually two websites. One is raven-light.com, and that's for my counseling work and my consulting work. But soulnavigation.net is when I do the readings and I drop in and help you connect. I think the new motto at the top is align with your inner compass. And because it's not about you becoming dependent on me, it's about how do you connect up with and learn how to follow your own inner knowing, and have that voice become a bit louder in your life rather than all the other voices that crowd things out. So I'd be honored if you want to seek me out, soulnavigation.net or ravenlight.com.
And we will add those links in the episode. So that way, if you need it spelled out for you, just look in there. And we appreciate you coming
Thank you
on. I'm glad
very
to
much.
form this friendship. And I'm sure it's going to last a long
Yeah,
time.
I'm really eager to stay in touch.
Yeah.
So
So
thank you.
thank you very much.
Blessings.
Yep. All right, guys. Till
Bye-bye.
next time. Reckless success. All right, guys. We're going to wrap up. You can follow us on TikTok and YouTube at reckless.success. Instagram at recklesssuccess. We're on Spotify and all major podcast services. Hit that subscribe button, please. For more information on May Excavating, check out our website or TikTok. That's a wrap. Thanks.